Hi, Mrs. Barbara.
Yeah, hi.
Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the podcast. I want
Oh,
to,
happy to be here.
want to especially appreciate you for taking out time to be here. And I want to, I just want to appreciate you for being here. And for most of you that don't know who Mrs. Barbara is, because I have a wide audience, range of audience from the US, from Nigeria, and from other parts of the globe. Mrs. Barbara is she is a trauma recovery educator, speaker, therapist, and also the creator of the Ascendance method. It's a privilege to have you here, ma. So we're going to be talking about, you know, trauma and like your work is usually on trauma and PTSD. But before we go into the discussion fully, I want you
Yeah, nice
to
to meet you all.
walk us through the journey of choosing that career path.
So, um, it all started when I was actually young, and um, I didn't realize, of course, in that time that my childhood is different from others, or that I'm suffering from trauma caused by accident of my mom or environment I was growing up. It's a lot of poverty and illnesses and all that. So when I was 17, I my body just collapsed and I was diagnosed with the chronic fatigue syndrome with ME. And I was told that I need to learn to live with that. But that's a we name it the chronic fatigue syndrome. It's an extreme fatigue. The daily achievement is go to toilet, but it's also very painful. It's headaches, joint pain, muscle pain, like all body just aching. And so when they told me that they actually don't know what is causing it, and then I need to learn live with that, I just went like, that's not possible. It's not possible to live with this, and I need to find solution. And I was lucky enough to find out Silva method of mind control in that time. In that time, it wasn't widespread and wasn't known, even if it was created already in 1940. And in that course, I start understanding the connection between mind and body, and I created my own miracle. I First day when I was there, I was able to switch off that pain, and that was like, wow, that's how it is possible. And then in 6 months, I was able to start living normal life and be out of chronic fatigue syndrome. And doctors just didn't even know like how that happened. It just stopped existing in for me. So that was start of the journey when I start looking for how it's created, why that connection between mind and body, how we influencing what we thinking, what we believe, is influencing our behaviors. And I look backward and realize that I had complex PTSD. I had a childhood trauma from the many different types of tiny or big things combined and pile up and pile up and pile up. And I become very passionate about helping other people. So I worked for a very long time in IT, actually, as software architect and engineer. But that's kind of led me to that I'm looking on thing as system, as the like why it's not working, or reverse engineering why it's created something way, or where the error coming from. And the same way I start looking on why we even have the trauma responses, why we do developing this issues which facing our life, why we are not all happy and purposeful and confident and content, and where it's really coming from. And study different modalities of hypnotherapy and neurolinguistic programming and one brain, and what is on the market. I practically studied probably all, and I saw the same thing in many of them. And from that start kind of growing that what I call now ascendant method. And the core core of it is actually definition, what it's mean to be healthy mindset, what it's mean to function as we supposed to, as we are born to. And the core of it is what I call the 5 pillars of self. We are all born with the 5 function of the mind, which if they working in the balance, they working with our body, and we can function fully as we supposed to, then we are able to deal with anything which coming in life to us. But when we get them disbalance in childhood, which we quite do, then something is not working. So this 5 pillar of self is inner strength, self-love, intuition, wisdom, and purpose. But the key thing which is holding all together is that inner strength. And inner strength is that inner force we have. And when we are children and our needs are not fulfilled, when we are afraid and left to live with that, when we cannot express who we really are, what we do is actually we start shrinking that inner strength, we start pulling it inside, we start suppressing it, we start suppressing who we are, and that all these other things cannot function as they're supposed to be. So we often know what is good for us, but we will not do it. Or we can gather a lot of knowledge, but we are not able to apply it, so it's not turning to the wisdom. And we stop trusting our decisions and our intuition, and quite often ending in some situation we didn't want to, if it's the secondary trauma of some toxic relationship, or struggling have the jobs, or keeping our purpose life, like what it is what we really want to do. So that's the core of my ascendance method.
Wow, that's so interesting to listen to it, and it's so important. But in the process of our conversation, you were talking about you working
And
in IT.
I find out that, yeah,
I said that we're talking about IT in the process of our conversation. What does that mean? What does that mean?
I used to work in IT, but now I am trauma therapist, and also teaching others how to work with the trauma. But
Oh,
with the IT having this, the common thing is
go ahead, I'm
that
listening.
we often say that, yeah, we often say that our mind is like supercomputer. We kind of like that comparison, is it? But when we start really think about that as the computer, it have rules. And in the IT, sometimes people would say, "Oh, it's not working. It's not working. It's making errors." But we always find that it's because people not follow some procedure, or some process, or people would say that the system counted wrong. It's not possible. Computer cannot count the mass wrong, but it's about what we expecting that the results will be, or how it will be calculated. And the same way, when we are little and as we growing up, we creating our own programs. We creating how we translate the word for us. So we could meet one person, and that person, it's really not good to us, and maybe telling us how ugly we are, or how stupid we are, how we don't deserve to live. And we start believe that quite often, because the children taking everything very literally. And then we met the other person, and that person even can say something nice to us, but we will compare it to that previous program, and we would say like, "Oh, they lying. It's not true. I'm not good. I'm not confident. I cannot speak up." And when we need to start realizing what it is, what we start believe. So I believe there are 4 stages of how we can get out of it, and what I call the steps of ascendance. And the first one is recognizing what's actually we created, what's happened to us, and get to that stage which we call awareness, that we know what actually we coming from, what's happened to us. And it could be small things, it could be big things, but people really underestimate how much we influence, because it's starting even when we giving the children the dummy, we giving them dummy, which original name is pacifier. we're just telling them, do not be yourself. I don't want to know what you think. I don't want to know what your needs are. And we already start telling the children that what they think, what they want, is wrong. Then we need to go through the process of release, and we need to get it out of our body so we can heal. People can heal from many illnesses which are created by their past trauma, and get to what I call absolution, in that moment when we leave it and we can go forward. The next step is actually grieving, and that's the part which we need to realize that what trauma took from out of us. And for young people, it could be realization that maybe they didn't go to the school they wanted, they didn't study what they wanted, they didn't choose the sport they wanted, because was influenced by family or environment, or they didn't dare to ask for it, they didn't dare to go about their dreams. And when we are older, we have much more things which we're grieving and regretting, which trauma came from us. So it's good to start soon. And then the fourth step, it's actually amazing because it's a rediscovery. And what is leading what I call ascendance. It's that life of being now and here, be content, growing and exploring, but without that effect of the past. Be actually fully present with all our emotions, which we need because all are useful in our body, which have enormous healing powers. So keep healthy, keep growing, maturing, and use our wisdom and self-love to care for us, trust our intuition, and live actually the purpose, which is mean that we're doing something which fulfilling us internally and also serving the community around us. And everybody can do that. It's useful to do it with somebody because quite often we need somebody else to give us, kind of hold us the mirror, I would say. Because quite often when we're trying to ask ourselves inside all these questions about what really happened to me, how I felt about it, what I really, we don't answer ourselves because we already ask ourselves these questions 1,000 times. So it's why it's good to go to somebody. For some people it's a friend, for somebody it's therapist, for somebody it's pastor. It can be somebody who kind of hold us mirror and help us to look back and see what actually happened to me. And it's not about blaming anybody, it's just about it acknowledging and be able to start moving out of it so we don't pass it on, because many, truth be told, 80% of trauma it's caused by parents, if they want or don't want. It's not about if they will want to hurt their children, but mostly because they passing their own unresolved trauma, their own insecurities. It could be showing us outbursts of anger, or be cold, or be controlling. And again, they were programmed to that in their childhood. So I work a lot with the parents, helping them to change the narrative, changing them themselves so they can change their environment for their children. And in the autumn will come up my book, which is calling Purposeful Parenting, How to Raise the Healthy Mind. And it's about that questions for parents about what is really parenting mean for them. And also what are these healthy boundaries, healthy communication with children, and how they can help them to grow without or process what's happened to them and not causing them more. But the first step for parents is actually work on themselves.
Thank you for saying that. There's a place you're also talking about PTSD. So can you shed more light on it, like the meaning of PTSD and why you think a lot of people struggle with it or have it?
Yeah, complex PTSD, it's more widely spread that people are realizing. And because complex PTSD, it's not from the one event which happened to us. You know, we can have the car accident and then you can develop PTSD. But complex PTSD, it's most of the time develops through the childhood, and it's from that many different. It's kind of like the torture by 1,000 cuts. It's about that. As I said, since we give the children the dummy and we start telling them, shut up, we're telling them, I don't care that you are hungry, I don't care that you are tired, or you are sleepy, or you are scared, through letting children crying to the sleep, locking children out to the rooms alone, not listening to what they're saying, punishments, especially capital punishments, physical punishments, but also when children witnessing the parents' arguments, parents which using alcohol or drugs, single parents when the one role model missing and that parents holding everything and don't have that capacity to provide emotional support for the children. It could be illness in family, that one of the caregivers is ill or sibling is severely ill. It could be bereavement in family, which quite often it's not explained to the children. Almost, people believe that children don't remember. Children remember everything since before they was born. They maybe not remember it consciously, but they do remember it. And then when it's coming from these symptoms of anxiety or depression or lack of confidence or switching between fighting and running, like outbursts of anger, and then issue to have focus and just trying to escape somewhere. And that is showing in many symptoms in adulthood. If it's the problems in the schools, problems in learning, problem in the relationships, keeping the job, but other polarity could be workaholism, like doing just a job and not focusing on anything else. It could be being in the toxic relationship on the both sides, the one person who is controlling and other person who is people pleaser. They are just on polarities of our trauma responses. And there is also one which is very common for complex PTSD, which I call the fifth trauma response. And I call it the fake resilience. It's kind of then when we start living with that belief that with the willpower, we will just overcome it, and we will keep going, and we will just not feel anything. We will just do as we are told, and don't feel anything, and just keep going. And many people even become quite successful, get the jobs and working, and then switch, and they will have the burnout, they will break down, they will completely lose it, because it's not that the real resilience, it's not that they are really comfortable with themselves, they just pretend so hard for so long that it's just unbearable, and they wearing the mask, and the masks are cracking. And we saw it very intensively now during the COVID, when was the lockdown. I don't know how much was in Nigeria, but here in UK and in Europe was really people like staying home, isolated, completely break down their schedules. And that's really show off that enormous amount of people who were going through the fake resilience, because all these coping mechanisms of routine, going to the work, going to the gym, going to the library, meeting with the friends, they were stripped away from them. And now all these emotions, they just start flooding up, and they didn't know what to do with them. So we saw enormous increase in the domestic violence, because people cannot cope with themselves in the relationships, with the depression, with suicides, and especially with the young generation, yours, with the social anxiety, that when they just didn't hold that fake mask on them anymore, so they didn't want to face anybody.
You were talking about how parents can be able to, how most of our parent traumas come from parents. Are there some traumas that somebody might have, but then they pop up later in life? Because I've heard people say that there are some kind of traumas that a lot of people might not even know that they have. Maybe it could be due to some of the things that they were being taught or their upbringing by their parents, which did not actually show immediately but later popped up in life. Is that true? And if it is, could you go deeper and explain to us?
Yeah, it's true, because children, we all as human have things which we call inhabitation. I call it normalization. We're so able to adapt to the environment we're living in, which is visible on like how we grew up. It's even on we have different looks in different adapted to the environment, but we also adapting to the world we're living. So the parents become that for children, the parents are like gods, like they are these big ones who providing food and keep the shelter and keep the child safe. So the children will start seeing this environment as that's the normal, that's the like how it is, until they start seeing and comparing with the other things. But because they learn to deal with that, and they see like parents can try their best, for example, and then logically and rationally we can see that parents trying, but then in the adulthood they would realize that the needs wasn't fulfilled. And it's that big difference between that. It's not always mean something terrible happened. It doesn't mean that parents was awful and aggressive, or it's mean that the need of the child wasn't fulfilled, which could be because the parents needs to work 2 jobs to be able to provide food and keep the roof overhead. It could be because, like my mom, she had an accident when I was 4. It wasn't her fault, but it's led to that she was in hospital a lot of time. Then she had the disability, and but nobody was able to provide for us as children that emotional support we needed, and also we needed to start to taking care of ourselves much sooner than we probably should as children. And so a lot of people don't realizing how much that environment they grew up influenced them. And there is the other possibility also sometimes, is that when something which was kind of emotionally painful or physically painful happened, the mind suppress it. And there are people which have complex PTSD and they don't remember their childhood. Really, they would say, I remember since I was 12, for example, or 13. They cannot really consciously recall what happening to them when they were smaller, because the
Right.
mind kind of hide it.
So, so the mind can hide some of these things, that some of the information of, wow, that's amazing. Why does that happen?
Now there are two options. Yeah, the one is that when we are in the trauma responses, when we are in kind of danger, our mind processing a lot of things, like everything, the sounds and noise, noises, what we smell, what we see, what we feel, because it's switched to that survival mode. And that's about the complex PTSD. We just switch to the survival mode as children and we keep living in it. And when we're doing it, our mind really processing the enormous amount of data. Like every second, it's about 20,000 information processed. And that's just overwhelming. So what is often happening, that one option is that we overflow, like why we kill the computer, which we overflow it with a request. It's not able to move it from the short-term memory to the long-term memory because it's just too much information and not able to process it. Also, we processing during sleeping, and very often when children are in the survival mode, they struggle with sleeping, they don't sleep deeply, they don't have that right wave of the sleep to allow the mind actually process it correctly. That's a one option. So then we don't remember it because mind actually didn't really move it to that long-term memory. It's like, okay, we have it on the sticky note and then we throw out that sticky note and it's not become the book. But when we also can be option that the memory is so painful and so full of emotions that mind just kind of lock it away. And those memories we are actually able to unlock when we look at that through, for example, through hypnosis and going to regression. We can recall these memories which were just locked away. So people can remember, and people quite often when I work with somebody, they would get they can even remember how they felt before they was born or during birth, or how they felt when they was little babies. And it's how our mind remember things. But what people often don't understand and remember is that we not reacting from these exact memories. We reacting from what our mind creating as the map on amygdala. So it's kind of shortcut. It's just like, okay, when we do this, we do this. I start creating these imprints, I would say, of reactions, and then we start reacting from them, and we start expecting that we are reacting from them, and we can start be anxious about that, and that become almost self-fulfilling prophecy that it will happen because we start reacting based on the programs we set up. But as I said, we have tools. People can rewrite it. Everybody can do it for themselves, or somebody can help them. Like I, for example, work with hypnotherapy and combination of the modalities, which I also teaching in the course for trauma recovery specialists. But people can do it also by themselves. The very important is that we're realizing that we're not reacting from present time, that we're reacting from the past, and that awareness start bringing the change. We can start correcting that what we actually believe. And I think that, for example, you as the young man, I think that it's amazing what you're doing, trying to share this information with people, but it's also showing your own power of feeling that you have wider purpose. And I think that it's very important for young people to realize that we all have purpose, but everything could be purpose if it satisfies us inside. But it's also our way how we influence the community. And purpose can be big man because we need it. But it can be anything. It can be teacher, it can be cook, or it can be podcaster.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Barb, for coming on the podcast. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing the ideas and trust that it's going to affect the lives of people all around the globe. And this is going to change a lot of lives and help people to be able to handle trauma better. Thank you for listening, guys, and I'll see you in the next episode. Peace out.